with a week to go before US President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs on India kick in on April 2nd, reports indicate that India is open to cutting tariffs on more than half of American imports. That could be over $23 billion in the first phase of a possible trade deal that the two sides have been negotiating and are hopeful of completing at least partially by the end of this year. Trump's reciprocal tariffs are expected to hit 87% of India's total exports, which could be upwards of $66 billion. There's an American trade delegation that's led by Assistant Trade Representative for South and Central Asia. That's Brendan Lynch, who is currently in New Delhi, holding trade talks. New Delhi's last-ditch effort to avert the full impact of Trump's tit-for-tat tariffs. Now, what exactly are the extent of the damages, if at all they do happen on India, is something that we need to understand in greater detail before we try and understand what best possible measures India could take. I want to play out this quick report that my colleague Sakshi Bajaj has filed explaining what all is at stake for India's trade and trade sectors given these tariff threats that are looming large.
If the April 2nd reciprocal tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump do indeed go through, then what will be the India impact? That really is the big question. How can reciprocal tariffs impact India? India could lose up to, believe it or not, $7 billion annually from reciprocal tariffs, as per an analysis by Citi Research, while the decline in overall exports may be limited to 3 to 3.5% as per SBI Research's study. So which sectors are likely to be impacted and how are they likely to be impacted? Now remember, the steel and aluminium sectors have already been hit by 25% tariffs, and exporters worth $5 billion in the metal industry are already facing an impact as per initial studies coming in. Besides this, of course, the pharma sector is concerned. As far as the pharma sector is concerned, remember, India is the largest supplier of generic drugs to the US, and India's growing electronics exports also could lose significant market share. The agriculture, jewelry and auto sectors are also likely to be impacted if indeed reciprocal tariffs do go through. Now, analysts expect potential US tariffs may become a catalyst really for reforms from both India and the US, with reports suggesting India is eyeing a tariff cut on more than half of US imports, and US officials in India this week to finalize the bilateral trade framework. The spotlight really is on how reciprocal tariffs will be looked at and whether the talks could go beyond trade.
All right, so viewers, you know that there is going to be an impact and it's going to be significant, as Sakshi was explaining. I'm going to put out those big questions that hopefully we'll try and get answers to in the conversation that I'm going to have with the guest this evening. Whether these will avert tariffs, whether India will be able to cut tariffs, whether India's losses could be at least could be partially reduced is another important aspect of this conversation. And lastly, how much is India prepared in terms of dealing with these tariffs? The sectoral impact is the other aspect of a conversation that I'm going to get Ashok Sajanhar, former ambassador, and Parth Shah, who's the global trade expert and director at Deloitte, to hopefully answer. And gentlemen, while we get your answers, hopefully we'll try and cover as much ground, and let's keep playing those graphics as well as those questions for our viewers to keep understanding what we are talking here. All right, Mr. Shah, let me start with you. Some of the numbers that my colleague was pointing out does indicate that it's not like there will not be an impact. There will be a significant impact that Indian exporters, Indian trade will have to brace for. The question is, how can we mitigate it?
So, thank you very much for having me. It's a very relevant point that you have made. It's going to have a far-reaching impact. The fact remains that when two large economies are sitting on the table discussing certain things, it cannot be a one-way benefit that is going to happen. There will be impact, but what is important is that from India perspective, if we are allowing certain tariff cuts, then we should also negotiate to have greater market access and of course the technical barriers which also becomes a big question when India is exporting to US. There should be talks on reducing that as well.
Okay, Ambassador Sajanhar, the fact is some of these trade discussions do go a bit of back and forth. Both sides come with hawkish positions to try and find some sort of a middle ground. How hopeful are you that before April 2nd, the trade talks that are happening right now could lead to some kind of a positive breakthrough?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I think it is, India is negotiating in good faith. India is negotiating in, with goodwill to try to come to a mutually acceptable understanding. You would also have seen, Gauri, that even in our budget on the 1st of February, we had made some tariff concessions which were targeted particularly to exports from the United States to India. Even when the Prime Minister was meeting Donald Trump on the 13th of February, there was, a reduction of duty on bourbon whiskey, which is of interest to the United States. And more recently, we have cut down on, taxes on Google, 6% tax on Google that was being levied. So I think we are trying to make all efforts to ensure that there are no reciprocal tariffs that are imposed on us. And as you said very correctly, and as Sakshi also in a report said, that there are going to be about $23 billion out of about $46 billion, $43 billion that come to India, exports from the US to India. We are going to cut down on tariffs on those particular items. So US exports to India would increase. We will have the trade surplus that we have of about 35 odd billion dollars, that will come down. And of course, the items that you mentioned, whether it's agriculture, whether it's electronics, whether it is automotive components. The last point that I would want to make is we want to make certain that they will not have a negative impact on our small scale, medium scale industry, and also on agricultural products. And that's why we'll have quotas on the imports that
I was coming to just that, the quotas, but I'm going to come to that in a bit. Before that, there are two things I want to address. One is the fact that the latest S&P Global report that has come out, it came out yesterday, which said that while of course India's exports to the US do constitute about 2.3% of the GDP, there will be an impact. But if you take some of the most contentious issues, which is aluminium and steel, which started the trade war last time around as well, the Indian exposure is actually less than South Korean exposure. Now imagine the size of the Indian economy, the size of the South Korean economy, and then we are actually at a lower impact than Seoul. So which also tells you that one needs to look at this in a more holistic way. Mr. Shah, I want to bring you in on that fact, which is that yes, there will be an impact, but it's not like it's going to be only on India. There are going to be other economies, smaller, with more impact possibly.
That's right. And on impact on other countries, that's one point that I want to make, that of course India has comparatively higher tariff rates when compared to what US levies and what some of the South Asian countries as well levies. But our rates are in line with what is the commitment with WTO. If the impact of tariff or levying tariff is on a particular country, of course there will be impact on other countries as well. The levying extra duty on China can have positive impact on India and so on. So if there is a levy which is happening on particular product only coming from a particular country, it will have impact on other countries as well. Maybe positive, like you mentioned.
Okay. Again, quoting some reports that have come in which say that 87% of India's exports to the US could be impacted or affected rather in varying degrees. But the other side to that is that when trade talks take place, there is always give and take. So if India is going to bring down some duties, it's going to probably give in on some factors regarding US demands. It will also try and have some sort of a leeway when it comes to export of services. And is that really, Ambassador Sajjanar, our big bulwark, where we try and ensure ease of Indian highly qualified, skilled manpower to the US, those barriers being brought down?
Yeah, that is what we'll be looking at, as far as services are concerned, to enhance our exports of services, because even in the area of services, we do have a small trade surplus with the United States. But I think even in the area of goods, Gauri, we will try to have more access, because there are some non-tariff barriers in the United States. There are also some peaks as far as products of interest to India are concerned. So I'm sure we are negotiating on those also. So I think we will definitely try to have a balanced, outcome, so that, we also come back with some takes. It's not only gives as far as we are concerned. But then, of course, we'll really have to wait and see as to how it all pans out, and, what happens to the reciprocal tariffs, because Mr. Trump is totally unpredictable. There is nothing that can be said, even if, there are decent commitments that are made by India, but still he might think that, he has to demonstrate to the world that he's a strong leader, he's a
Yes.
powerful leader, and, he might still go ahead with the tariffs. But I
Indeed.
think this should be also used as an
Unpredictability
opportunity.
of these trade
comment.
talks and the trade scenario is something that not just India but the world is bracing for. This is an important conversation, but given the paucity of time, I need to move on. Mr. Shah, thank you so much for joining me today. Ambassador Sajjanar, there's more that Trump is talking about, and I want to introduce you on that as well, which is that US President Donald Trump has renewed his demand for sweeping election reforms in the US, and he cited Indian electoral system as an example of efficiency and integrity. He cited India and other countries as examples, and in fact, President Trump said that the US now fails to enforce basic necessary election protections employed by modern, developed and developing countries. And said India, they've been trying and tying voter identification to a biometric database, while the US largely relies on self-attestation for citizenship. That's the kind of disconnect that exists between how the Indian election machinery runs and how the American election machinery runs. Ambassador Sajjanar, the fact is India is not just a vibrant but also the largest democracy. The scale at which we are able to conduct our elections and also bring in technology is something that the world is envying us, no less President Trump.
Absolutely. I think it is, India is not only, as you very correctly said, Gauri, largest democracy. I think India is a veritable role model as far as a democracy is concerned, and particularly, as far as the elections, conduct of free, fair, unbiased elections. That is the linchpin, that is the pivot on which any democracy sort of works and revolves. And Indian, the authenticity of the voters in terms of the credibility of the election, that is very, very strong. And even as far as, once the votes have been cast, in terms of counting it, you would remember that even in the presidential election, there are big states like Texas, like California, they continue their counting for weeks on end. And still, there are not absolutely final credible results that are coming out of there. While as far as India is concerned, within a few hours, we have, last election, 650 million people voted, out of a total electorate of 900 million. So about 68% of our electorate voted.
Yes.
And we were able to get the final results in about 4 hours.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Unlike California, which keeps on voting for, keeps on counting for almost a fortnight. I have to leave it there, Ambassador Sajjanar. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.